How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Bat Flip Podcast. I am your new co host, David, joined by Damien. Damien, tonight we're going to talk about Albert Pujols, Luis Castillo, the closing division races, among other things. But before we get started, how you doing tonight?
And I am doing pretty well. Just excited with the way the season has unfolded. We got some good storylines here with the big milestone with Albert. We got a couple other interesting things that I didn't see coming this way over the past week, and just excited with the postseason bearing down with just a week before it starts hitting the road. But how are you doing?
Doing all right. I'm sad because I don't get to watch my team in the postseason. But other than that, I'm good. I'm ready to talk about baseball because the rest of the, the league is certainly off and running, and we can step right in and talk about a guy who's played for the Dodgers in the last year in Albert Pujols, and I mean this guy got to 700 home runs. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and it's kind of the march towards this, but he finally got there against your Dodgers the other night, hitting two in the same game. I would say this is maybe a last in a lifetime type of deal. I don't know if we're ever going to see 700 home runs again.
Yeah, I mean, Matt and I a couple weeks ago we brought up the names of people who could very well potentially get to 700 home runs, but you're talking about guys who are at 350 home runs right now. Like, it's a long way away, if ever. And this is such a historic milestone. I mean, four people. He's the fourth person ever to hit 700 home runs in the game of baseball. Like, it is incredible what we've been able to see in this lifetime, and to know that we'll be able to say we saw Albert Pujols, one of the greatest players ever, hit 700 home runs. And I think we were on a call Friday night when we were talking about it, and I told you exactly it was going to happen in LA when he got there. Andrew Heaney destroys lefties. Heaney likes throwing high fastballs. That's what Pujols has been crushing as of late. He got one right over the middle, missed the spot, crushed it. I think it was 440 or something like that. And then, the second home run he hit was actually impressive. It was a slider that was inside, caught. I mean, it was a perfect painted pitch on the inside of the part of the plate. I mean, it backed up, but really good location, and he was able to turn on it as well. Just a lot of, I think if there wasn't a place like St. Louis that it wasn't going to happen, a place like LA where he really wasn't rejuvenated last year, and the whole fan base really got a love for Albert Pujols last year. And if he wasn't going to do it in St. Louis, I feel like LA was a perfect place for him to do it. I mean, the entire place erupted. I mean, everyone, it felt like it was a home game for the Cardinals there when he hit that homer.
Yeah, and I think the game was over at that point too. There's a big score, so it worked out as like kind of a perfect storm to get that ideal reaction from everybody. Where everyone was more invested in Pujols than the game, and he's such a complete hitter. You look at the some of the breakdowns that came out once he hit the 700. I think he went 500 homers off righties, 200 off lefties, or something like that. Just so balanced as a hitter in terms of how well he was able to perform. And you look back into some of those early Cardinals days, when he was, absolutely murdering my Cubs. He was just so consistently good against everybody in the league. I think back to that Brad Lidge home run he hit in the 2005 playoffs. I think that just absolutely he hit the ball to the moon to tie the game in the playoffs. Like, he's been big on the big moments for his whole career. He won a couple of World Series with the Cardinals. Came up clutch in that 2011 World Series too. He's the kind of guy who's had a big impact on baseball, especially kind of leading from that steroid era to today's game. One of the, I guess, probably the last players to have an impact in both of those are like Miguel Cabrera and Albert Pujols.
Yeah, I mean, they really are. They're sort of the last of that dying breed of that era. I mean, we talk so much about how these historic performances like Pujols has got to, and with the 3,000 hits that Miggy's got to, 700 homers for Pujols, like, we legitimately have questions about when will be the next person we see do either one of those.
Yeah.
And it could be we don't see one for the next 10 years. I mean, that's a realistic option. I mean, you're looking 8 to 10 years down the future when you might have the opportunity to see that. And it's just been it's been really cool this year as a fan. I feel like there's been a lot of history, and you see that it's kind of the next guard is really taking place. But you're seeing those guys who have been, the focal points of the league for the past 10 to 15 years get those milestones, and it really makes you feel good just as a baseball fan and as somebody who enjoys the history of the game.
As somebody who's had to cheer against Pujols his pretty much his entire career up until he signed in Los Angeles. I mean, I'm not someone who's going to go, oh yay, Albert Pujols was the guy who hit 700 home runs, but I'm the guy who says, damn, somebody hit 700 home runs. That hadn't happened since Hank Aaron, or I guess since Barry Bonds, but at least in terms of non PEDs, hadn't happened since Hank Aaron. So, just a milestone for baseball is what it is. And as a baseball fan, I can absolutely appreciate that. And, Pujols had his impact on my baseball fandom, even if it was stealing the 2005 MVP from Derek Lee. But, we,
Yeah,
we move on, I guess.
and he has the part of my fandom since becoming a Dodgers legend last year,
Right.
and being able to meet him this offseason. And I think that's probably a good way to end it off is just the type of guy he is. He's a really down to earth and really good guy. You don't hear a bad word about him anywhere around the league. For a guy like that to be able to hit the historic milestone and to be as good of a player as he is or has been throughout his entire career, I think that's a testament as well.
And just think about the guys that baseball's lost over the last couple of years, though. I mean, Ichiro, Miguel Cabrera's winding down, Joey Votto's winding down, Adrian Beltre just retired. A lot of those names that have been in people's mind when you think about baseball are starting to go away, and I think this is kind of their big swan song. David Ortiz is another one that comes to mind. Just Alex Rodriguez, a lot of those famous baseball players that kind of ended up being celebrities. I think Pujols was absolutely one of those guys, and they're starting to go away. It's starting to be this new group, and I don't know when we're going to have someone as slam dunk first ballot Hall of Fame as Pujols coming up on the Hall of Fame ballot. I think he'll probably get 100% of the votes.
He should. I mean, he should get 100% of the votes. One St. Louis writer is probably not going to give it to him because he's pissed off that he left for the first time or something baloney like
Right.
that. But he absolutely deserves it. But we'll transition over to the next point, and I guess transitioning from one Dodgers legend to I guess another in a way. I mean, it's a real stretch there, but we got the news this week that Don Mattingly is going to resign as manager of the Marlins at the end of the season. They claimed it was a mutual agreement between them. Mattingly feels the Marlins need a new voice. I'm sure the Marlins probably feel that same way. He's a pretty good manager, but I just don't think that he was ever given the opportunity with the Marlins, with the talent there, to take them to a deep postseason run or anything.
I'm going to look it up real quick. I don't want to misspeak here, but I believe if I can get his since 2015, yeah. So Don Mattingly has been with the Marlins since before they traded away Giancarlo Stanton, Christian Yelich, Marcelo Ozuna, JT Realmuto, before they lost Jose Fernandez. I just I look at the way that has gone, where he came into an organization on the upswing, and then tragedy struck. Other, selling the team, moving stadiums, all kinds of things were going out of his control, leading them into a rebuild that he had no part of. They kept him around, and now the talent is there on this major league team, but I don't think it's taking those necessary steps, right? The offensive players have just not developed. And I don't know if that's a Marlins Park problem or a coaching problem, but you're looking at they've called up so many young guys, and they bring in guys that don't have success. I mean, Jose Aguilar was good for a little bit, or Jesus Aguilar was good for a little bit. He got DFA'd. Jorge Soler struggled. Avisel Garcia struggled. Miguel Rojas is up and down. they don't have a path forward because they just don't have any consistency in their coaching and in their ability to develop these position players that can match their pitching, which their pitching right now is very strong. And with all these years of losing in the past couple of years, they've had a lot of talent influx from the top of the draft and from the free agency and stuff. They can't ever put it together. It's a good change, but I just don't feel like it's Mattingly's fault.
No, it's not Mattingly's fault. I think he's a very good manager in the league. Um, he he has that old school feel, but he's not afraid to go with the analytics at times. But it's the Marlins. Just once they went to that sell off, it I mean, they really just sold the farm that way, and they tried to rebuild it, and they've been trying to push that the last couple of years, with the Aguilar move, with the bringing in Avisel Garcia and Jorge Soler. Even though I didn't love either one of those signings for them, really, I just didn't feel like they fit what they really needed. um, they've made a couple moves the last couple of years, but it's been a team that has had controversy, and it's been in the middle of drama a lot recently, with the old ownership, and then the sell, and then the Jeter leaving because he doesn't believe in what they're doing, and then Kim Ing coming over, and now taking it all over herself. It's it's been a weird flux there, and I wonder if it's not a Kim Ing saying, like, I'm just kind of ready for my own flair on this team, my own leadership, and get rid of the whole coaching staff. I mean, we've seen the turnover the recent years, but it just feels like this is that big reset button between the old ownership and now the new ownership, really wanting to make their point felt now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think Kim Ming can really lead this team well in the grand scheme of things. You think of Miami as a small market team, but Miami itself is not a small market. There's no reason for this team to be drawing bottom five attendance figures. But the location of the stadium's not that great. The stadium itself isn't much of a destination. I think there's been problems in like the concrete of laying a foundation of this team where you don't really have the support of the city because you put the onus on the taxpayers to get the stadium. The stadium's not that good, and then and then on top of that you've got all these ownership switches, and you've got Jeter in and out, and all this turmoil, and you've traded all your stars. It's going to take a lot to get the city of Miami back in behind the Marlins. And I just, I know it's one of those things where all these things are being seen by them firing Mattingly. Mattingly wasn't doing anything wrong. He wasn't the difference, and I don't think a manager is going to make that kind of difference. But when you take a look at the Marlins, I mean, they should have been a better team this year. They have a pitching staff they could have won in the playoffs. It wasn't too long ago they were beating the Cubs out of the playoffs in 2020. They're not a bad organization. The problem is, they have not been able to develop any of that talent that they've acquired, and then they've completely missed on those trades back when they actually did the sell off, which has prompted that Kim Ing hiring. And I think if she were in charge back when they were selling off Christian Yelich, those trades would look a lot different because while Christian Yelich wasn't an MVP caliber player when he was traded from the Marlins, he was a lot better than the return they got for him. So, you know, you look at those trades. Stanton went for nothing, and just to get rid of the contract and stuff. This is just an organization that was rotten to the core for a long time, and I don't think Mattingly was rotten, but he's getting the blame, additional blame where he maybe doesn't need it.
Yeah,
So,
I do think that he will be a managerial candidate even in this offseason for some teams. I wouldn't be surprised at all. He might take a year away, but you will see him managing a team again here in the future. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's, even one of the more high profile jobs out there, if it is an Angels job, or if it's
ooh,
maybe even a Phillies job. Like
White Sox.
it maybe even a White Sox, but he feels like a Dave Dombrowski guy or an Art
Oh yeah.
Moreno guy. Like, you know, I feel like that might be the way they go. I mean, get him a team with some talent on it. I mean, the White Sox are a good thing. Jerry Reinsdorf might do that too. But he's going to be a good manager. He just needs the team around him. I mean, we saw him have success with the Dodgers when he was managing there. They never got over the hump, but they were always consistently good with him. You know, he didn't, and he got probably a little bit more out of those teams than some other people might.
I wonder if, if that shouldn't be the reason for some of these teams to not hire Don Mattingly, because Mattingly's not the kind of guy that can put you over the hump. He's the kind of manager that you bring on when you're already where you want to be. You just need someone who can step in and lead you. You know, maybe the Phillies are a team that could do that, but you know, I don't know. They've played very well since Girardi was gone, so I just I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the plan of any of those teams is going to be, but
Yeah,
maybe we could talk about uh, the La Russa thing now because we're talking about
yeah,
managers. I don't know. That makes some sense to
we,
me.
we could throw it in there.
So Tony La
Um,
Russa was, um, sorry, I'm stealing
no,
it from you.
you're good.
Tony La Russa was told. I think it just came out today that he's not returning for 2023, and in fact, he's going to stay away from the team for the rest of this season due to the medical condition. And Dan Bernstein of Chicago Sports Media said today that they're not going to be returning for 2023. So, Tony La Russa out in the White Sox, and I don't think there's anything that could describe his tenure there other than a complete failure.
Yeah, I mean, even when Tony La Russa was hired, we all scratched our heads and said this isn't going to work. And then when he had problems with the team early on, you know, benching Yerman Mercedes when he was going absolutely off because he swung at a 3-0 pitch, and then, you know, getting into it with Tim Anderson, telling him to not show emotion and to run the bases, you know, and just some of the other stuff we've seen from him there, we just knew it wasn't going to work. I mean, he was out of the game for a long time, and he has a hard time connecting to the younger players. We always saw that was going to be a thing. You know, the health issues this year, you never want to see that stuff creep up and into anybody's job and force them out of somewhere. We've seen it a little bit with Tito Francona as of late as well. Um, you know, so it's not the way that I would have wanted La Russa to end off there. Like, it sucks that it has to be a health thing, but there was already some rumors that he wasn't going to come back anyways. You know, and we'll see when it's officially announced that he's not going to come back. Like, I know we're kind of reportedly saying it, but it always felt like this was going to be the outcome anyways. Even if he had stayed healthy through the rest of the season, the team's underperformed the last 2 years, and they've been really bad this year, and they've really underperformed this year. I mean, this is a team that people were talking about as a potential World Series contender, you know, coming into this season, a team that had all the talent in the world and could match up with anybody, and in a division that they should have probably easily walked away with. And they're not even going to make the playoffs now, because we mentioned they were in that battle with the Guardians over the weekend, and the Guardians like swept them and won the division and took the White
Yeah.
Sox out of it. So it's something we saw coming. We knew it wasn't going to work from the get go. It was just a matter of when's it gonna happen, and not if it was going to happen.
Yeah. And I think part of the big problem with this was that you look at the way the White Sox roster was constructed, and it's a very like a manager can have a big impact on a roster like this. It is very, very poor in terms of defense, and you would want someone with a clear mind and a sharp intellect in order to be able to. And I'm not saying La Russa's like dumb or anything, but I'm just saying like a new analytical mind where you're expecting somebody to be making aggressive and making those defensive changes. You've got, and I'm looking at the numbers. You've got, I think, 4 DHs that hit full time this year in Gavin Sheets, Andrew Vaughn, pretty much AJ Pollock. He was bad on defense, and then Eloy Jimenez. So you had to figure out a defensive alignment that was going to be able to get outs and prevent extra base hits into the gaps from a group of pitchers that was fly ball reliant. Giolito, Cease, Lance Lynn, those guys give up fly balls. They strike out a lot of guys and then they give up fly balls. You have to be good on the outfield defensive side. And then you've got these guys here who are not good defensive outfielders. I'm looking at Andrew Vaughn's defensive rating. Vaughn had a 120 WRC plus this year and was worth 0 wins above replacement. He was a replacement level player, even though he was 20% above league average out with the bat because he was so bad defensively. And I just know that a more analytically inclined manager would have been a lot better at aligning Andrew Vaughn, Gavin Sheets, Eloy Jimenez, AJ Pollock into a more reliable defensive formation. Whether it be by shifting or something to that effect. The White Sox were not made to have a guy like Tony La Russa managing them. Not only was it poor defensively, but also it was poor with the personalities on this team. Think about Tim Anderson. Think about Luis Robert. You have these guys who are just fiery personalities, but they're being suppressed by a guy like Tony La Russa. It was just such a disappointing hire back when it was first implanted, and now it's coming to a conclusion that isn't even satisfactory. Where La Russa isn't getting canned, right? He's on a medical leave, and that's no good either. So this is just an all around disaster for the White Sox, and I expect big changes to this organization in the offseason because they have a horrendous farm system. Jose Abreu is going to be a free agent. There's going to be some big swings, I think, with what they do as a front office and as an organization because they can't do this again.
Yeah, they can't. But it's really going to come down to, is Jerry Reinsdorf willing to make the moves that he needs to do? Because he hasn't really been willing to do that the past couple times that they've come into this situation. They came into it with, hey, we kind of knew they were going to need a younger analytical mind there, and then he went and hired his friend Tony La Russa.
Right.
And it's like you got to be willing to make the right moves and make the move that you might not be as comfortable with. And that's not something that Reinsdorf has really ever been willing to do in anything that he's had his hand in, even back in with the Bulls and stuff. So they're gonna be a fascinating team because they have a lot of talent and they can absolutely be aggressive and go out there and make some bigger moves on the free agency side and try and bring some people in that way. And I mean, they could be really interesting, but they're going to have to be willing to commit to that.
I think you could also see some guys be
Yeah.
made available that would be, on another team would be kind of untouchable. I think Yohan Moncada might be one of those guys, and he may be, one of those untouchable guys they want to try to rebound, but he's off of a absolutely dreadful season this year. And, he is not hitting for power and playing a position where you need to hit for power in third base. I wonder if some team might pay them a lot of prospects to pick up a Yohan Moncada, where they could then turn around and make a free agent splash and pick that position back up. But one of Sheets or Vaughn too could be available.
I could absolutely see Vaughn being available, and Moncada just seems like he needs a fresh start somewhere. Like,
Yeah,
it's something that I always find interesting and try and look for when we see these big names get traded and we see the big prospect name come back, because a lot of times that prospect is not going to live up to the expectations of what you're expecting when you traded for them, right? Like, it's absolutely unfair for Yohan Moncada, who was one of the best prospects in baseball at the time, but for White Sox fans, he got traded for Chris Sale. And like,
well, before you keep going, Yohan Moncada has like 2 4+ win seasons, right? Like
oh,
he's been
absolutely,
very, very good for them. And
absolutely,
this year he was one of the reasons that this team did not perform. So
absolutely. I mean, he has
yeah,
been really good for them, but I feel like it's still it might be a place for him to do a fresh start. Like,
yeah.
it's really hard for those players to live up to the expectations there, even though he's been really good.
I look at his swing and I see like a one of those pretty like Ken Griffey Jr. style swings. If you guys want to go watch some Yohan Moncada footage here, his swing is amazing, man. It is a thing of beauty. And then he hits 12 home runs this year, and I don't understand how he doesn't generate a ton more power. I think with a different coaching group, maybe he could potentially be a 30 homer guy. I think you'll see the Dodgers, the Rays, those analytically inclined teams, they'll be in on him if he actually moves. The White Sox may be going, thinking the same thing that we are right here and going, well, we're not trading Yohan Moncada. What if he fixes himself? So at the end of the day, I think it's unlikely, but he's the most interesting name I think that they would consider moving.
Yeah, it's going to be something to watch for because this team can make some big moves for sure. But let's talk about a team that made a big move at the deadline and went ahead and made a big move right before their push for the postseason to lock somebody up. But that's the Seattle Mariners. We talked about how they made the big move and traded for Luis Castillo at the deadline with a year and a half of control. They went ahead and signed him to a 5-year, $108 million extension. Has a vesting option that can make it a 6-year, $133 or $133 million dollar deal. And there's also another additional thing in there. If he has to have a UCL surgery in his right elbow between 2025 and 2027, the Mariners will receive a $5 million option for a 2028 season, just protecting themselves a little bit.
I This is a steal, right? I mean, he's making less than Robbie Ray, making less than Kevin Gossman, and he's a year younger. This is a steal. It's a heist for the Mariners. How did they get him to agree to this? This
I
is awesome.
I yeah, I don't know. I love this deal from both
Oh
sides.
my
I really
gosh,
do.
yeah.
I love this deal from both sides because if you're the Mariners, now look at that top four in the rotation for the next 4 years and tell me what it looks like.
I mean, I'm ready,
It,
man. I'm ready
it's
for a Mariners dynasty.
it's Luis Castillo, Robbie Ray, Logan Gilbert, and George Kirby. I
Yep.
mean, right there, boom, boom. That's your four for the next 4 years at least.
Hmm.
And we're talking about all of those guys have number one to number two upside. Like we've seen Robbie Ray last year was lights out. He's been really good this year. Logan Gilbert, the first half of the season was lights out. He struggled a little bit as of late in the second half, but he showed ace upside. Luis Castillo is a sneaky ace. He's really really good. I don't think he gets enough credit for what he's been able to do in Cincinnati for his whole career in that bandbox there. And then you got George Kirby, who is one of the best command pitchers already as a rookie this year, and has been downright filthy for them. And you're talking about that's your first four in that rotation moving forward, where a lot of those teams in that division have question marks, and now you have those four in your rotation locked up. You have J.P. Crawford locked up. You just locked up Julio Rodriguez. That team is going to be around, and I'm ready for it.
I think the Mariners have been following the Braves' blueprint of lock up your good players, give them the money, because now we're looking at it. $108 million doesn't look like that much money for. I think Luis Castillo would have made easily more on the open market, but he but he's making 108 million now. The Mariners have locked him up. They locked up Robbie Ray. You look at they're just picking up and laying down these young players. They're setting themselves up to have a competitive team for the next 5-6 seasons. It's just it's just perfect, I think. And for a team that hasn't made the playoffs since 2001, I, this is the kind of thing that can lead you into maybe a little. I said dynasty at the beginning, but I think more of a competitive run where they could make a World Series run here. They could still think about making some splashes in free agency. I don't think any of these moves have really prohibited them from doing that, because this is a really affordable deal. They essentially can splash anywhere but the rotation at this point, because they've, I think, built a fairly affordable long term sufficient rotation.
Yeah, and it's Jerry Dipoto. I mean,
Yep.
Jerry Dipoto is going to be aggressive. I mean, we've seen that everywhere he goes and in any move he makes, right? This
Hmm.
team is set up. The reason he's able to do this team is set up with young stars that are cheap, or just cheap stars in general, right? Like you have Ty France, who's not making a ton of money, and you got him under control for a long while there. You got J.P. Crawford, you just signed. He's not on a big deal. He's not a star, but he's really good, right? You have um, you have Julio Rodriguez locked up. You have Jared
Yep.
Kelenic if he's ever able to fulfill the potential there. You have Mitch Haniger still there, who's not a ton of money, but he's a good glue guy for you, and he can hit you 30 homers. I
He's
mean,
a free agent after this year.
oh, is he? Well,
Haniger
I,
is.
I would
Yeah.
assume he would
They
probably
might
still
think
be
they might
back
bring him
there.
back. Yeah.
But you have a guy who's always aggressive there, and is willing to make whatever moves. I mean, heard him any big name free agent that was out there. I mean, we heard him in the Chris Bryant talks this last year. We heard him in on the Trevor Story talks this last year.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to go in on the shortstop market again this year. You know, I know they
Hmm.
signed Crawford, but you could slide him over to second. They could easily be in on the Xander Bogarts, the Carlos Correa, the Dansby Swanson if he gets there, the Trey Turner. I mean, this team
The
can very well. Good.
I was going to say Nolan Arenado too.
I
Their hole might even be bigger at third base.
I don't think Arenado opts out. I don't. I don't think he
Dude,
gets
he's
that. I
getting
don't.
more. He's getting more. That's another conversation. But
Yeah,
I'm considering him a free agent. I just think he's getting more than 5 years, 130 million or something like that. He'd get more than that if he opts right now
I think it's like
by a
142. I
ton.
think. I don't know if he's getting more than
I think
five
he's
at
getting 200
142.
million right now over like 6 years easily.
We'll see. But
But yes, another
this,
conversation.
yeah, this team is set up. This team is very well set up to make aggressive moves this year. And if there's ever a person to do it, it's going to be Jerry DiPoto. This
Hmm.
team is set up for success. I liked them last year. I loved them coming into this year, and I could just imagine what he's going to do this offseason, the big move he's going to make. And it's going to come
Yeah.
out of nowhere. It's going to be somebody that we aren't even thinking about is available right now, and he's going to make 18 trades to make that one trade happen. And it's just what he does.
Yeah, the thing about the Mariners is that even if you think they might not have enough prospects or they might not have the capital, it'll be made. There will be deals made. The team will change. I think Kellenick could be one of those guys that gets moved for another big piece. Also, he's the kind of guy who's still got that prospect pedigree, who could easily be the centerpiece of a trade. I mean, maybe he doesn't like playing in Seattle. Who knows? It's really far away, but um, it's the kind of thing where Seattle, even while after trading Noel V. Marte, after giving up some of their best prospects for Luis Castillo, they've anchored Luis Castillo into their rotation to make that prospect loss not feel as great. And they've still got a really good farm system.
Yeah,
I mean, this is a team only a couple years removed from picking right at the bottom of the league. So, um, they're always drafting well anyway, on top of being, one of the top teams that drafts in the last couple of years.
yeah, they have a ton of prospect depth still. I mean, you're talking about Matt Brash is still there, Emerson Hancock's still there, Harry
Hmm.
Ford, and some others. I mean, on top of Kellenick and some others
Right.
there. They're very well still set up to make that move. But let's go ahead and transition over to the next thing, and that's with the Tampa Bay Rays getting a big addition back to their team this year, right in time for that postseason push. As Tyler Glasnow, who had to undergo Tommy John surgery last year, they weren't quite sure was going to make it back for this year. He's ready to return. He's made some minor league rehab starts. Sounds like to start with, he's going to be limited to about 3 innings, 45 to 50 pitches, but they are hoping that he could be a 5 inning guy, as they head to the postseason.
That's that's huge for the Rays' postseason chances. Glass now also might be pitching himself toward a trade. We've seen his name in some of these trade rumors with the Rays because they're so good at developing pitching. But they also lost Shane Baz for I think the whole year next year.
Yep.
Um, so the Rays may be interested in bringing him back, and they want to see what Glasnow can do. But this reminds me, not identically, obviously, but when Kyle Schwarber came back, I think this is a very quick timeline for that Tommy John surgery. Is it at a year? Like right at a year, and we've seen recovery times in the 18-year range for a Tommy John, especially for a guy who throws as hard as Glasnow does. So this is a huge boost to the Rays, and I think they're just going to bring Glass now like a bullpen weapon, 3 innings. We saw the Braves win the World Series last year, just utilizing these 3 inning performances by guys. Glass now getting into that because of necessity rather than the Rays requiring it is just it's going to be huge for their chances because you won't have somebody mad that he's only going 3 innings because Glass now knows he's a little more limited by his injury. This is the kind of thing that can really boost the team because he's out here firing 100 mile an hour with that hammer curveball that is absolutely devastating from the 6'8" frame. I mean, Tyler Glasnow's maybe the favorite for the AL Cy Young a couple years ago, and here he is coming back right in time for the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know if you've watched any of his minor league rehab stuff he's been doing. He's looked electric. Like he's
Yeah.
looked like Tyler Glass now, and not holding anything back. But what it does for the Rays, what team has been the one team that is able to make a deep postseason run, even into the World Series, using the opener type strategy?
Yeah, it's the Rays.
It's been the Rays. There is absolutely a case where Tyler Glasnow is an opener for them that goes 3 innings, one time through the lineup, and then they mix and match better than or just as good as anyone else in the league. And then if he's on that 3 innings and he's got a low pitch count, then maybe you throw him back out there for a fourth. Like if there's a team that can handle a pitcher going through this and do it well and make it the best case scenario for them, it's the Rays. They're the one team that can do that because they have to do something like this and they do it all year long. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're not afraid to do this in July rather than just the postseason, where many teams just wait until the postseason and try and figure it out. Like it's a big addition for them because they've had some guys, go out with injury with Baz going out. McClanahan's even been dealing with his own things as of late. Patino hasn't lived up to what you've wanted him to be. You've got some good performances out of like Drew Rasmussen, but you to get a guy like Glasnow, that's a game changer. That's a big lift for a clubhouse. They now feel they have a dude back. They have a guy that can go out there and be absolutely dominant for them. And what that can do for a team like the Rays, who are so good fundamentally, so good at the little things, so good defensively, to add a guy like that back to your team and give you that boost could be really a really big get for them.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention Corey Kluber as one
Yeah,
of those Rays pitchers, though. Too, he's taken the choice of other good starting pitchers that have gotten older and had to shift what they're doing, and they've decided just that walking people is for suckers and they shouldn't do it anymore. Corey Kluber's got like a 1.10 walks per nine or something. He's not walking people. He's just like, nah, I'm not doing it anymore. Throwing strikes, hit it if you want, and he's been a perfectly effective normal starter for the Rays, which has been kind of funny that he's more of a contact guy these days. He's not the Cy Young strike him out, ace Corey Kluber, but he's a reliable strike thrower who's going to go deep into the game. He might give up a few runs, but that's okay because he's just going to roll a double play on the next out. And then this Rays offense, which has been really good this year, even without Brandon Lau, Wander Franco really making a big impact, he's been able to keep them in the game, and they've been able to do a lot of damage with guys like Yandy Diaz and Randy Arozarena. So, the Rays are going to be an interesting team because they're always an interesting team when it comes to the playoffs because they do things so much differently. They have so many guys with electric stuff in the bullpen. Like Pete Fairbanks is back throwing 99. He's got like a 1.23 ERA. It's going to be there's going to be some names made, I think, by this Rays team in the playoffs, and I think it might be like Tyler Glasnow, Pete Fairbanks, Drew Rasmussen. Like those guys are going to be stepping up, and the Rays are going to be tough to beat. It's going to be interesting.
it will be. And mentioning the Kluber thing, I mean, that just goes back to what I was just talking about, how the Rays are so good
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally. He doesn't need to walk people when they have a defense like the Rays play right
Right.
behind him. Like it goes back to it. And another thing we should mention is that Brandon Lau's out for the year. Uh,
Yeah.
they're going to have missed, be missing him as well, which is a big loss for that team because that's a power hitting second baseman that plays really good defense. But getting Glass now back is maybe helps circumvent that a little bit by a guy who can just strike everybody out. But before we head over to players of the week, just wanted to highlight the close races. I mean, I know we talked about them a lot last week, but we have 1 week left in the season. I mean, as we record next week, I think there will be a day left in there. But just looking at what we got so far, the battle for the National League East. I mean, it's a game separating the Mets and the Braves, and then I think the other race really is the NL wild card, where you have the Phillies and the Brewers are separated by a game and a half right now, and the Padres are a game and a half up on the Phillies and are starting a 3-game set with the Dodgers right now.
Yeah, the NL wild card I think is going to be the close one. That other than the Braves Mets, whoever wins that division is going to, I think, have a big advantage over the one who doesn't. But right now it's the Mets by a game, but the Braves and the Mets are, going back and forth to trading blows, trying to win all the games. It's reminding me of the 2015 NL Central, when you had like three teams at 97 wins or something like that. You got these two teams kind of slugging it out. Um, but I think the one that's most intriguing is the Brewers, coming up on the Phillies, and the Phillies are in Chicago playing the Cubs, and the Cubs would much rather see the Brewers out of the playoffs, than in. So I'm sure Cubs fans are kind of half cheering for the Cubs this week, hoping that the Phillies can win and kind of step into that playoff spot so the Brewers don't take it. But I mean, that's the one I think that because the Brewers can play spoiler with Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, an offense led by Yelich and some of those other guys that Willie Adames, who's had an incredible season. Rowdy Tellez, another one who's had a good season. The Brewers could be sneaky. They really went off the rails when they traded Josh Hader at the deadline, and um, you know they might be getting it back here just in time to maybe make the playoffs. So it's that NL wild card race that I've got my eye on.
Yeah, see, I got my eye on that National League East. I mean, you got the Mets and the Braves. The Mets are playing Miami for 2 right now, and then they end the season with Washington for 3. The Braves are playing Washington right now for 3, and then they end the season in Miami with 3. But in the middle of that, they have a 3-game series between the Mets and the Braves in Atlanta this weekend.
Oh, yeah,
So
that's going to
it,
be the must watch baseball in this weekend.
it's going to be. It's going to come down to that series because they're both playing easy teams for them at least over the next series outside of that, and it's a 1 game separating there. And I'm not sure that game will probably or that series will also probably decide the tiebreaker between the two,
Yeah,
because if the Braves were to win 2, they end the series tied. So
man.
it's going to be really interesting this weekend of baseball, especially National League East baseball. It's going to be something, and I'm not sure if let me see if I can tell.
The record against each other.
No, just right now. Okay, so they haven't announced any pitching matchups yet.
Yeah,
I wanted to see what that was going to look like, but it looks like Taiwan Walker is starting tomorrow for the Mets,
yeah,
and
that's true.
Carrasco's today. So Scherzer and DeGrom are lined up to pitch in that series, and probably Bassett if I have to
Yeah,
assume.
I think that's it. Yeah,
That would be the 3.
I don't know
And
if I don't know if they have
so
Peterson this week. Then it's Peterson's their other one.
Odorizzi's
So
pitching tomorrow there, and for the Braves pitching today is Moeller, and Elder pitched yesterday. So Freed and Wright are also lined up for this
lined
weekend.
up. Wow, that's a playoff
Strider,
series. I mean, that's outright a playoff series.
yeah, they are missing Spencer Strider. He did have to go on the IL with I think it's an oblique strain. I want to say they hope he's back by the postseason time. But yeah, I mean, if you're having Kyle Wright and I would maybe even Charlie Morton, it might be Morton. It's probably Wright, Morton, and Freed against
Man,
Bassett, DeGrom, and Scherzer. Like that's some postseason baseball right there.
that
That is some
absolutely
big
is.
time
The
postseason
atmosphere in
baseball.
Atlanta is going to be out of this world too. I mean, the fans in Atlanta get up for big games, and that is a huge game. And it's funny we're praising the Braves. Matt's not here tonight,
Yeah,
but of course we're giving the Braves a lot of love because they deserve it this season, man. This team has been very, very good. And that's two teams, they're nearing 100 wins. They'll probably both get 100 wins, and one of those teams isn't going to win the division.
yeah,
So
yeah.
just outstanding.
One of those teams are going to be in the wild card, and the
It's
other team's going to have a first round bye.
yeah. That
Like,
and that's why this is such a big series for the whole group is, that first round bye could be crucial in lining up your rotation. I mean, just imagine if the Mets have to throw DeGrom and Scherzer in the wild card.
yep,
Then your NLCS matchup looks like Chris Bassett, Taiwan Walker, David Peterson, or it's not nearly as as foreboding as getting the DeGrom Scherzer matchup there in that NLCS or in the LDS rather.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it's going to be a massive, massive series. It's going to be some exciting baseball to watch this weekend for sure. But before we wrap up, let's transition over to our players of the week, and we'll start on the hitter side. So, who do you got for your hitter this week?
I got my fantasy center fielder Brian Reynolds from the Pirates. I honestly wonder how much y'all have mentioned Brian Reynolds' name on the pod over the season. Man, he's been good this year. The Pirates have been bad, and he's been a subject of trade rumors, which is probably the most his name's going to get mentioned. But man, he has hit really well this past week. 3 homers, 8 runs scored, 6 RBIs. He's got a 531 on base percentage. He's heated up in the perfect time, right around the fantasy playoffs. But also, when the Pirates need to start turning the corner, I think, and uh, I'm going to be very intrigued by what the Pirates do this offseason because that's a team that does have a number of pieces in place to be able to make a run at some free agents and try to make a run at the NL Central because with the aforementioned possibility that Nolan Arenado goes to free agency and Yadier Molina and Wainwright are retiring, the Cardinals, this might be their last year on top of the NL Central in concrete fashion, and I think it'll be wide open up for the taking. We already have heard the Cubs are looking to sign people. Are the Pirates going to join them? Because I think they could. It's a team that's got a lot of pitching talent. The pitching hasn't necessarily cemented itself as it's something that's really good. But Brian Reynolds has. He's won the starting job. He's really become a rock solid defender in center field. He's a great hitter. He's a great leadoff hitter. He's the kind of guy who can really anchor your lineup. He's proved that this week, and I think the Pirates should be going after free agents and trying to make a move. Trying to trade for Otani with the big cash of prospects they have, calling up Henry Davis soon. That kind of thing to really get going because they could very easily be next year's Orioles with some moves.
Yeah, it's going to take a big philosophical change for the Pirates to make a move like that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about a team that when they had McCutchen and you had Marte and Polanco when he was good, and you had those other guys there, a borderline playoff team, a team that was fighting for wild card, they wouldn't even go for it then. They wouldn't go out and make the moves that they needed to make at that point. It would take a big time change for them to have to be out there and do it. They absolutely have pieces in place. Like O'Neal Cruz has looked good at times. I mean, he's struggled a little bit, but you expect that to happen. Brian Hayes not had a great year, but he's shown the flashes. Brian Reynolds really good. You have Henry Davis down there that is going to be a really good catcher as well. You have some other guys who have really surprised this year. You know, I they're in a really tricky spot because they're not quite ready to go for it, but they're not quite let's stay in tank mode. But you need to find those value plays there that you can go sign to middle of the road free agent deals that are going to help set your team up for. I really feel they're probably 2 years away from really being able to make that bold move and put themselves into a contention spot. But Brian Reynolds, I mean, he's had a fantastic season. He's been really good. We haven't mentioned him much, and that's just basically because the Pirates haven't been good. They haven't given us much to talk about. But when you have weeks like this out and outside of the trade rumors, you deserve to be mentioned. I mean, he's tied for the lead in WAR, the offensive WAR, per Fangraphs this week. And he's just overall really, really good, switching in center fielder that brings speed and power. I mean, what else can you ask for?
Funny story. His last year, his outs above average in center field was 10. This year, it's -7. So, maybe not as good set defensively in center field this season, but 26 home runs, he could easily corner outfield for you. Yeah, I
Yeah,
just
I would be
you know
interested to see what the positioning factor has to be too, because that's a big drop for something that
that's
we
just
haven't really
center.
seen much decline.
That's just him in center field, and yeah, I wouldn't have expected that kind of decline just 1 year. But that, to be fair, is it's just what the numbers are. I don't know that I have any.
I mean, it would be interesting
agenda with that.
to see more.
So
But for my hitter this week, I went with a rookie who we haven't talked about much either. I mean, he's not a super flashy rookie. He's not somebody who's going to jump off the stat sheet to you. He just has been really good. He does everything really well, and that's Stephen Kwan of the Cleveland Guardians. I mean, this week he had a 429 average, a 448 on base percentage, a 714 slugging, even for a guy like Stephen Kwan, who's a contact based guy. It's really high. A 232 WRC plus, 2 homers, 8 runs, 9 RBIs, 4 stolen bases this week, and I think even one of those homers was either a go ahead or a game tying grand slam in the ninth inning at home. I don't know who that was. It might have been against the White Sox. Um, but I mean, you're talking about a guy who was not a super high rated. I mean, really prospect. I mean, I guess he was top 60 coming into the year, but a 298 average, a 373 on base, and a 400 slugging with a 124 WRC plus this year. And here's something that you're never really going to see in baseball nowadays: a 10% walk rate with only a 9% strikeout rate.
yeah, Stephen Kwan he was touted as having a 80 grade bat to ball skill, not necessarily like a contact tool, but like the eye. Actually, no, he did have an 80 grade hit tool. Yeah, he's the kind of guy who might be able to make this kind of profile work where you don't slug, you just smack the ball around. But he's also incredibly athletic. He's got 19 stolen bases. He's played good defense in the outfield. This is a unique profile, and it's one that often doesn't work in today's game because you got to hit for power. But when you're sporting a 373 on base percentage, you're stealing bases, you're playing defense, you're creating value in other ways besides hitting those home runs. That's what you have to do it. And Stephen Kwan's kind of exemplifying that. I think he's got 2 hits today. He might get up to 300 by the end of the episode today. So
He's
um,
at 300 right now.
yeah, he just got there. So that's just downright impressive. And that's kind of the kind of thing that an 80 grade hit tool is going to bring. There aren't many 80 grade hit tools anywhere. I think
No.
Wander Franco might have had one, but I haven't heard that in a while. And he's got 4 wins above replacement. I mean, he's been a very valuable player. I don't think he'll win AL Rookie of the Year, but he should certainly be in the conversation for it. I mean, this has been a really good season.
Yeah, he really should be. And one thing before we move on to is, a guy like him, you'd probably see a really, really high batting average on balls in play. It's only 321. I mean, it's not really for a guy who's batting 300. That's not all that much higher than what you would think, with his profile with a contact speed type guy. Those are usually pretty high. Um, so it makes me think that it's pretty sustainable with what he's doing. He's not been super lucky this year, maybe a little bit, but not a tremendous amount. And he's only going to keep growing and filling into his game more, anyways.
A
But
guy a guy with that kind of profile has to dodge soft contact and dodge like the infield fly outs.
yeah,
Right now, his infield fly rate is 9%, which I think is pretty low, and then his soft contact rate is 18%. He mostly hits in the medium percentage. So Stephen Kwan's got if he can keep that up, this is the kind of profile that could stick around. He's always been able to hit minor leagues all the way up. I worry that he won't be able to sustain this, but it's worked for the Guardians this year. He's been this performance this week, one of the big reasons the Guardians won the AL Central. So, um, yeah, I'm a Stephen Kwan fan for sure. I think he can do it. He's got the tools.
yeah, and he's sort of. I mean, maybe I'm way out there, but he reminds me of a young Michael Brantley. I mean, obviously Michael
Mhm.
Brantley when he first came in didn't have the power, but he had just that eye and that contact type approach. I mean, he reminds me a lot of Michael Brantley, and I mean from the Guardians as well.
Right. I would have almost said maybe a Dustin Pedroia kind of. Pedroia ended up getting into a lot more power as he went along and hit like 15 to 20 homers, but he was the kind of guy who could just get the bat on the ball, steal the bases, play aggressively. Stephen Kwan, I think, does that for the Guardians at the top of the lineup.
Yeah, I mean that's what Brantley did too. I mean, if you look at the
Yeah.
numbers, it's pretty comparable, really, to what Kwan's doing right now. But anyways, let's go ahead and transition over to the pitching side. So, who's your pitcher of the week?
We mentioned him earlier. I took Bryce Elder of the Braves. You know, when the Braves are sitting here going, you know, game for game with the New York Mets, he went and threw a complete game shutout the other night against the Pirates, which is his second start of the week. And his other start this week, he went, I think, 6 2/3,
Five and
maybe
two
five and two
thirds.
thirds, and only give up a run or two. So Bryce Elder's had a couple of really good competitive starts in the last week to keep the Braves in the game. You know, he's not walking guys. He's more of a contact guy. He's not one of those flashy, you know, Spencer Strider level guys. But he's only 23 years old, man, and he's pitching in these huge games down the stretch that just means so much to this Braves team that really wants to force the Mets into that playoff and get, you know, DeGrom and Scherzer out of the way in the wild card game. You know, for him to come up and do this as a rookie, um, just absolutely massive. You know, a complete game shutout in this time of the year when you're battling that closely with such a heated rivalry. That's a huge performance, and I think that's definitely worthy of a Player of the Week.
Absolutely, it really is. And just looking at his log, one thing I found interesting: he's pitched 9 games this year, but he started 8 games. 6 of those 8 games have either come against the Nationals or the Marlins.
Yeah, what was the
And
Nationals that he did? I said the Pirates. My bad.
he did Nationals both starts actually this
Yeah,
week. Actually, his last 4 starts, there was 2 against Miami, and then he went 2 against Washington. So it's
it's like
been, yeah, his first start against Marlins, 7 innings, 10 strikeouts, 1 run there. I mean, over his last 4 starts, he's given up 2 runs all in total. That first start was 5 and 2/3, 6 strikeouts, almost an identical stat line across the board of what his shutout was. Just gave up a couple more hits in that shutout and the 1 run, and one less walk there. But for Bryce Elder, for a team like the Braves, who we mentioned losing Spencer Strider, and Charlie Morton's looked, you know, like he's come down to earth a little bit at times this year, and then other times he's looked really good. We've seen them already demote Ian Anderson. For a team who's had some question marks on the pitching side, if you're able to get a good performance from from a rookie pitcher for your team and big starts coming into the end of the year here, that's really big for the Braves. And Elder might be making a push for a potential postseason spot, rotation,
yeah,
or just on that pitching staff, maybe even if it's out of the bullpen type deal. But he's been making a big push for that.
worth noting that his one relief appearance, he gave up 3 runs in 2 innings. So
Yeah,
that was not his better performance, but I just it's so big, I think, to have a 23-year-old in these games. And someone might argue, oh yeah, they're just using him against the Nationals and the Marlins, but the wins against the Nationals and the Marlins count as wins in the scorebook. They count the exact same amount as a win versus the Dodgers. So you gotta win all your games. And if Bryce Elder can get it done against the Nationals and the Marlins, what we say, right? They have more games against those teams
yep,
going the rest of the way. So he's going to get more chances to be impactful to this division race the rest of this week. He's going to need to keep performing.
absolutely. But transitioning over to my pitcher this week, I usually try and go with a guy with 2 starts as well. But the start that Blake Snell had this week against the St. Louis Cardinals, 7 innings, 2 hits, 2 walks, 13 strikeouts, just been, Blake Snell is always one of those people who is, when he's on, he's electric and he's really, really fun to watch. His fastball to his slider slash curveball, whatever you want to call it, is absolutely disgusting. But then he has blow up games where he gets hit, like a couple weeks ago against the Dodgers, 4 innings, 7 hits, 5 earned runs, 3 walks. I mean, the command's always going to be something you have to watch out for with him. But as of the second half of the year, he's looked really good. And if you look at the season numbers, I mean, it's 117 innings, the 3.62 ERA. But if you look at the FIP, a 2.77 FIP, a 3.15 xFIP, like he's really found it the second half of the year, which is going to be massive for that Padres staff. Um, you know, Moving forward, they're going to have some question marks with Yu Darvish. Is he going to, how long is Yu Darvish going to be able to keep it up? Is age going to catch up to him? He throws a lot of pitches. You just never know. He also battles command at times. Clevenger, I don't know I think next year he's a free agent or it could be this year.
Yeah, he's a free agent this year. Yeah,
But you're going to have the question marks there. You've locked up Joe Musgrove now.
Hmm.
But over the past year or so, I mean, there's even been more trade rumors with Blake Snell. Was he going to be a guy to get traded?
Yeah.
So it's going to be really interesting to see. But Blake Snell having that one start against the Cardinals this week, which was absolutely electric. He's one of the most fun pitchers to watch at those times. I think he deserved to be named as a pitcher of the week.
Yeah, and I did mention, Bryce Elder starts were against the Nationals, the Marlins. I mean, Blake Snell's was against the playoff team in the Cardinals. That's the NL Central winner. So, for everything that someone might have tried to take away from Bryce Elder's week, you have to give to Blake Snell, right? I mean, he did that performance, 7 innings, 13 strikeouts. The stat that caught my eye, I was looking for his average fastball velocity this year. It's almost 96. He was averaging 98 in that game. He pumped it up for a playoff atmosphere, and for 7 innings, generating that many strikeouts. That is fearsome if the Padres can indeed pull it off and get to the playoffs, because they are in that the NL wild card race. But if they make it to the playoffs, they're gonna have a chance to win behind the front three there of Musgrove, Darvish, Blake Snell. The way Blake Snell's pitching right now, you know, from the left side, that kind of velocity is pretty unprecedented in today's game. And if he can, keep the command together, which is when he breaks command, that's when he starts giving up those deep fly balls, which lead to the home runs and kind of lead to the blowups. If Snell can keep the ball in the yard, that makes the Padres a real difficult out in the playoffs. And I'm sure we'll get into our playoff predictions and stuff, and as we get into the playoff time of the year. But he's the kind of guy who's playing for a job. He's playing to not get traded. He's playing to kind of have an anchor in the San Diego rotation. I can't help but wonder, if he's pitching with a little bit of a vendetta too, because I think a lot of people kind of give up on him after kind of a mediocre year last year and a mediocre start to the season this year. But his last couple of starts this year have been absolutely fantastic and exactly what San Diego's been looking for since they traded for him.
Yeah, and I know it's not going to do people much good because of when this episode's coming out, but as we're getting ready to record this, or as we are recording this, Blake Snell starts against the Dodgers tonight in San Diego.
Yeah,
So it's going to be a big start for him because he's been really hit or miss against them. He either dominates or he gets lit up. This is going to be a statement game for Blake Snell tonight, trying to make that last little push. He did it against the Cardinals. Can he do it against a team like the Dodgers, who are one of the most patient teams? They will wait. They are not afraid to hit with two strikes, and they have shown the ability to hit Blake Snell very well. So it's going to be a
could
big
very
game.
well.
Good.
Yeah, it could very well be a playoff precursor. A
Yep.
matchup that the Dodgers see later. So, yeah.
Could very well be, but that will wrap it up for players of the week. And anything else you wanna wrap up on the show before we head out?
No, but I want to get back to the Arenado thing. I want to. We're gonna have to debate that one. That'll
We'll,
be a good
we'll,
one
we'll
once we get
yeah,
into the off season.
we'll talk about it going into the off season, but you're still wrong. But thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the Batfoot Podcast, and we'll catch you guys next week.